Keep it, the boy said, pushing the crumpled dollar back across the table. You need it more than I thought you did. Richard Caldwell, worth $2.3 billion, sat completely still, his eyes filled with tears for the first time in 11 years. Before we dive in, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. If you enjoy stories like this, be sure to like the video, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and share it with someone who'd love it too. Richard Caldwell did not wait in lines. That was the first thing people learned about him. He had people whose entire job was to make sure he never had to wait for anything. Not flights, not food, not answers. At 52, he ran Caldwell Global, a private equity firm that had swallowed 14 smaller companies in the last 3 years alone. He had a house in Greenwich, a penthouse in Manhattan, a villa in Tuscany he'd visited twice, and a reputation on Wall Street that made grown men straighten their ties when his name came up in conversation. He was not cruel in the dramatic way that made headlines. He was cruel in the quiet, efficient way that left no evidence. He cut salaries with spreadsheets. He eliminated pension funds with memos. He laid off 800 workers at a textile plant in Ohio 2 weeks before Christmas and flew to Aspen the same afternoon. When his assistant, a young woman named Patricia who had worked for him for 6 years, asked if he wanted to send a note to the affected families, he looked at her the way you look at a child who has said something embarrassing in public. "Send them their severance," he said. That's the note." He had a daughter he barely knew, an ex-wife who had stopped trying to reach him, and a calendar so packed with meetings that there was no room in it for anything that didn't generate a return. Richard Caldwell had built a life that looked from the outside like everything a man could want. On the inside, it was a beautifully furnished room with no windows. On a Tuesday in March, his private jet was grounded for emergency maintenance at Chicago O'Hare. For the first time in 4 years, Richard Caldwell had to sit in a public terminal and wait like everyone else. He did not handle it well. He sat in the corner of the United Club lounge, laptop open, phone pressed to his ear, snapping at his assistant about a delayed wire transfer. He hadn't eaten. He hadn't slept properly in 3 days. And he was the kind of tired that money cannot fix, the kind that lives behind the eyes and doesn't leave no matter how many first-class seats or 5-star hotels you throw at it. He was somewhere in the middle of his second angry phone call when he heard a voice beside him. "Excuse me, sir." He looked up, ready to dismiss whoever it was. It was a boy, maybe 8 years old, small for his age, with dark eyes and a backpack that was slightly too big for his frame. He was wearing a Chicago Bulls sweatshirt with a small stain near the collar and sneakers that had seen better days. He was holding a crumpled dollar bill in both hands like it was something precious. "I'm sorry to bother you," the boy said, with a politeness that seemed too old for his face. "But I'm a little short. I need $4.50 for a sandwich, and I only have $1. My mom's at the gate with my baby sister, and I didn't want to bother her because she's really tired. I'll pay you back. I promise I will." Richard stared at him. In 30 years of business, no one had ever asked him for $1. Millions, yes. Favors, constantly. But $1 from a child in an airport lounge with complete sincerity, he didn't know what to do with it. He reached into his pocket, found a $100 bill, and held it out without looking up from his laptop. "Keep the change," he said flatly, already returning to his email. The boy didn't move. Richard looked up again. "Take it." "That's too much," the boy said quietly. "I only need $3.50 more. I don't want to take what I didn't earn." Richard Caldwell blinked. He could not remember the last time anyone had said those words to him, and he could not remember the last time anyone had turned down money he was offering. He fished around in his pocket and found 3 singles and 2 quarters. He held them out. The boy took them carefully, counted them, and nodded. "Thank you, sir. What's your name? So I know who to pay back." "Richard." "I'm Marcus," the boy said. He stuck out his small hand. Richard shook it, more out of reflex than intention. "I'll remember you, Richard. My mom says you should always remember people who help you." Then Marcus walked away toward the airport diner with his crumpled dollar and his 3 singles and his 2 quarters. And Richard Caldwell sat very still for a long moment, doing nothing at all. He told himself it meant nothing. He opened his laptop. He closed it again. He watched Marcus through the glass window of the diner. Watched him carry his sandwich carefully back toward the main terminal, watched him disappear into the crowd. Richard sat with a feeling he couldn't name, something hollow and sharp at the same time, the way you feel when you realize you've forgotten something important but you can't remember what it was. His flight was delayed another 2 hours. He sat there in the quiet of the lounge, and for the first time in longer than he could say, he did not check his phone. He thought about Marcus and his too big backpack and his stained sweatshirt and his absolute refusal to take more than he needed. He thought about the 800 workers in Ohio. He thought about Patricia and the note he never sent. He thought about his daughter, who had turned 17 last month, and whose birthday he had acknowledged with a wire transfer and a text message that his assistant had drafted. He ordered a coffee. He drank it slowly. He felt, in some quiet and unwelcome way, ashamed. He almost left without doing anything. That would have been the old Richard, the efficient one, the one with no room in his calendar for things that didn't generate a return. Instead, he asked the lounge attendant if she knew where the family had been sitting in the main terminal. She didn't. He walked out into the terminal anyway, which he had not done voluntarily in years, and he walked until he found a tired-looking woman near gate B14 with a baby on her lap and an empty seat beside her where a small bull's sweatshirt was folded neatly. She looked up when he approached, cautious, the way women traveling alone with children learn to be. "I'm sorry to bother you," Richard said, using words he hadn't said in a very long time. "Your son helped me today, in the lounge. He reminded me of something I'd forgotten. I just wanted to say thank you." The woman looked at him carefully. "Marcus helped you?" "He did," Richard said. "You're raising a remarkable kid." Her name was Diana. She was a 3rd-grade teacher from Gary, Indiana. She was flying to Phoenix for a job interview because the school district in Gary had cut her position 3 months ago. "Budget shortfalls," she said, with the steady voice of someone who had already cried about it in private and was done crying in public. She had $400 in her checking account, a baby girl named Rose, a son who refused to take more than he needed, and a quiet dignity that filled the space around her like light. Now Richard sat down in the empty seat beside her. He didn't pitch anything. He didn't offer a $100 bill. He just sat, and he listened, for the first time in longer than he could honestly remember, to another person's life. She told him about Marcus's father, who had passed 2 years ago, about how Marcus had become so serious after that, so careful, so determined to be good because he said his dad told him that being good was the most important job a man had. She told him about the job interview and how she was terrified and hopeful in equal measure. She told him about Rose, who was 6 months old and already stubborn in ways that made Diana laugh even when she was exhausted. Richard listened to all of it. When his flight was finally called, he stood and shook Diana's hand. He handed her his real business card. Not the one his assistant distributed by the dozen, his actual card with his direct number. I don't know if that job in Phoenix works out, he said, but if it doesn't, call me. I have a foundation that funds education programs. We're looking for people who actually know what they're doing. Diana looked at the card, then at him. Are you serious? I'm learning to be, Richard said. He walked to his gate. He boarded his plane. He sat in his seat, and he did not open his laptop for the entire 3-hour flight to New York. He just sat with the window shade up, watching the country pass beneath him, all those small lives moving below, and he thought about a boy who would not take more than he needed, and a mother who kept going anyway, and a dollar bill held in two small hands, like something precious. And he landed in New York a different man than he'd been when he left Chicago. Not completely, not all at once, but the shift had happened, quiet and permanent. The way a bone heals. You don't feel it happening, but one day you press on the place that hurt and it doesn't anymore. What came next happened slowly, and then all at once. Richard called Patricia the next morning and asked her to draft a real letter to the families in Ohio. Not a legal document, a human one. She was so surprised, she asked him to repeat himself. He did. Then he asked her how long she'd worked for him, and when she said 6 years, he said he was sorry it had taken him this long to ask. He called his daughter. She didn't answer. He left a voicemail that lasted 4 minutes, which was 4 minutes longer than any voicemail he'd ever left anyone. And he told her he missed her. He told her he knew he hadn't shown up the way a father should. He told her he was trying to figure out how to change that, and he'd understand if she needed time. But he wasn't going to stop trying. She called back 2 days later. He contacted Diana 3 weeks after the airport. The Phoenix job had fallen through. He offered her a position leading curriculum development for the Caldwell Education Initiative, a program he established with $40 million of his own money funding arts and reading programs in underfunded public schools across the Midwest. She said she needed a week to think about it. He said, "Take 2. She took 1. Marcus visited the New York office the following summer with his school class on a field trip Richard quietly arranged. When Marcus walked in and saw Richard standing in the lobby, his face broke into a grin. "You remembered me?" he said. "I told you I would," Richard said. "I brought your money back," Marcus said seriously, and held out $3.50 in carefully saved coins and bills. Richard looked at the money for a long moment. Then he closed Marcus's fingers around it gently. "Keep it," he said. "You need it more than I thought you did." Marcus looked up at him. "Why?" "Because you're going to do something great with it someday," Richard said. "I can tell." In the 2 years that followed, the Caldwell Education Initiative funded programs in 63 schools. Patricia was promoted to chief of staff. Richard's daughter spent a summer interning at his office and told him at the end of it that she was proud of him, which undid him completely in the best possible way. Diana became one of the most respected voices in education reform in the country, and Marcus, who was now 10 years old and still too serious for his age, wrote Richard a letter every month updating him on his grades, his little sister Rose, and his plans to be an engineer so he could build things that helped people. Richard kept every single one. Here is what this story is really about. It is not about a billionaire having a change of heart. Those stories are easy to dismiss. It is about a child who refused to take more than he needed. In a world that teaches us to grab everything we can, to maximize, to optimize, to take the $100 bill and say, "Thank you very much." This 8-year-old boy held out $3.50 and said, "That's enough." And that small, a quiet act of integrity cracked open a man who had forgotten what integrity felt like. You don't have to be powerful to change someone's life. You don't have to be wealthy or influential or important. Sometimes all it takes is refusing to be less than you are, even in an airport, even when you're tired, even when no one is watching. Marcus didn't know he was teaching Richard Caldwell anything. He was just being who his father raised him to be, and that was more than enough. The last image is this. A Tuesday morning in March, 2 years later. Richard Caldwell is sitting in his office in Manhattan, and on his desk, next to his phone and his $2.3 billion calendar, there is a child's drawing of two figures shaking hands in an airport. Underneath it, in careful third-grade handwriting, it reads, "Real men remember people who help them." Marcus, age 8. He has never taken it down.